My name is Margaret. I'm 62, and I've lived in the same brick house on the edge of Brookhaven for over 20 years. It's quiet here, full of elderly neighbors and too many memories. After my husband passed, the silence grew thick, like ivy, crawling up the walls of a home that still looked fine from the outside, but inside had gone still. I kept things together. I still woke up at 6 a.m., still made the same tea every morning, still filed my library volunteer hours each week like clockwork. Everyone said I was doing so well, and I guess I was. No one expects much more from a widow in her 60s, just dignity, routine, and maybe a rose bush or two to keep her company. I hadn't noticed how bad the backyard had gotten until the spring rains came. Weeds taller than my knees, soil hard as brick. A leaning fence chipped paint flower beds that had once been Michael's pride, now full of nothing but brittle stems and stubborn dandelions. I told myself I'd get to it one of these weekends, but those weekends had come and gone for years. Then one Saturday morning, a knock came at my door. I opened it to find a young man standing there with a clipboard boots covered in red clay. He was tall, maybe early 30s, sun-browned skin, dark hair pulled into a short knot. His shirt had a faded logo that read Birch & Sons Landscape and Repair. "Ma'am," he said, voice warm but clear, "we're doing some fence work down the road, and your neighbor, Mrs. Langley, said you might be looking for help with your backyard." I blinked. "Did she?" He smiled. "Said it used to be beautiful. Figured maybe you'd want it that way again." There was no sales pitch, no pressure, just a question I hadn't expected. I stepped out onto the porch and looked toward the yard, overgrown and gray with disuse. I thought of Michael kneeling by the hydrangeas, laughing at his own inability to keep tomatoes alive, brushing dirt off his hands before reaching for mine. "Yes," I said quietly. "I think I might. That's how Caleb entered my life." The next day, he returned, this time with gloves and tools, no clipboard in sight. He worked quietly, digging, hauling, cutting back the jungle, one careful step at a time. I brought him lemonade. He asked questions, not invasive, just curious. "You grow up here?" he asked while pruning a rose bush. "Not really," I said. "Moved here after I got married. Never left." He nodded like he understood. That's a kind of growing, too. There was something about him steady, but not in a forced way. Gentle with plants. Gentle with silence. He didn't fill space just to prove he existed. That first week, he came by 3 times, each time a little earlier, each time staying a little longer. One afternoon, as he pulled ivy from the back wall, he asked, "You ever think of planting again?" I laughed. "I've done my planting." He looked over at me, not smiling, just thoughtful. "Doesn't mean the ground's no good anymore." That night, I lay awake in bed, windows open, listening to the soft rustle of new wind through trimmed branches. The air felt different, and I couldn't stop thinking about that quiet question spoken like more than just garden advice. If this beginning made something stir in you, something gentle, something curious, I'd love to know. Leave a comment or subscribe if you'd like to hear the rest of the story. Sometimes what looks like overgrowth is just something waiting to bloom again. By the second week, I found myself waiting for the sound of Caleb's truck tires on the gravel. I told myself it was because of the garden, the work he was doing, the transformation I couldn't deny. But that wasn't entirely true. He came on Wednesday, just after lunch. The sun was high, and the air smelled like fresh soil. I stood at the kitchen sink, pretending to rinse something that didn't need rinsing, watching him through the window as he moved between flower beds. There was a rhythm to the way he worked, deliberate, almost meditative. He didn't blast music or curse under his breath like the workers I'd seen around the neighborhood. He just moved. Like the garden had a language, and he was fluent in it. That day, I stepped outside with a pitcher of iced tea instead of lemonade. "You're spoiling me," he said, accepting a glass. "You're making my backyard look like something out of a magazine," I replied. "Seems fair?" We sat under the old elm tree in the back, the one Michael had wanted to cut down years ago but never did. Caleb pointed out a sprig of lavender growing wild by the base of the fence. "It's still hanging on," he said, crouching to look at it. "Sometimes things just keep going even when no one notices." I didn't know if he meant the plant or me. Later, as he packed up, he hesitated before getting into his truck. "Would it be all right," he asked, "if I came by this weekend, not for work? There's a local garden festival out by Lake Marlowe. Thought maybe you'd like it." I was caught off guard not by the invitation itself, but by how instinctively I wanted to say yes. "I haven't been to something like that in years," I admitted. "Then maybe it's time." I agreed, unsure of what surprised me more, his asking or my acceptance. That Saturday he showed up right on time. He wasn't in work boots, but in a simple button-up shirt and jeans. I felt suddenly self-conscious about my own outfit. A blue cotton dress I hadn't worn since before Michael passed, but the way Caleb looked at me when I opened the door made me feel seen. The garden festival was quiet, sunlit, filled with families and older couples and stalls selling hand-painted pots and heirloom seeds. We wandered, slowly. He asked me questions, not just about plants, but about music books, memories. At one point, we passed a vendor selling fresh herbs in small burlap sacks. I reached for a basil pot and paused. "Michael loved basil," I said softly. "He used to plant it every spring. Said it made the house smell like life." Caleb didn't respond right away. He just stood beside me. "That's a good reason to grow it again," he said. That evening, when he dropped me off, he didn't linger, just walked me to the porch, hands in his pockets. "Thank you," I said. "For today." "You smiled more," he said. "That was the goal." I stood there long after he left, the scent of basil still clinging to my hands, and for the first time in years, I didn't rush back inside. It was a Tuesday evening when the back gate finally gave out. I heard the crash from the kitchen, a dull, hollow thud that made me flinch. The wind had picked up again, and the old latch must have snapped clean off. I stared out at the open yard, the broken gate flapping weakly, and felt a strange mix of irritation and helplessness. Without thinking, I called Caleb. "I'm sorry to bother you after hours," I said. The gate just gave up. "I'll be there in 20, he replied. True to his word, he arrived just as the sky turned orange, toolbox in hand. He examined the damage in silence, then crouched low and got to work. I stood nearby, unsure whether to offer help or just stay out of the way. "You didn't have to drop everything I said after a while." He didn't look up. "You called. That's enough." When he finished, the gate swung smoothly again, better than it had in years. He brushed his hands on his jeans and looked at me. "Wasn't too bad," he said. "You caught it before it got worse." Still, I said, "Thank you." We stood in the soft dusk, neither of us quite ready to say goodnight. The air smelled like freshly disturbed earth and pine. I motioned toward the back porch. "Would you like something tea or something stronger?" He followed me inside without a word. I poured us each a small glass of wine, red, not fancy. We sat at the kitchen table, and the silence between us felt different than usual. He was watching me in that quiet way of his, as if waiting for a permission I wasn't sure how to give. "You always this generous with your time?" I asked lightly. He shrugged. "Only when I care." The word sat between us like something too fragile to touch. I didn't respond right away. I was thinking too fast. About the age difference, about the neighbors, about what people would think, about all the ways this could fall apart. "You're very kind," I said carefully. "But you don't have to feel responsible for me." "I don't," he said, voice steady. "I just like being around you." The honesty in his voice caught me off guard. I reached for my wine glass, but my hand trembled slightly. He noticed, but didn't mention it. Instead, he leaned back in his chair, his gaze never leaving mine. "You ever wonder," he asked, "what people miss when they decide they already know who someone is?" I swallowed. More than I'd like to admit. We sat there for what felt like a long time. Two people not pretending, not hiding, just sitting in the quiet glow of something unnamed but undeniable. When he finally stood to leave, he paused by the door. "I'll see you tomorrow," he said. "Same time." "Same time," I replied. After he left, I stood in the kitchen alone, the faint scent of pine still clinging to the air, and realized how long it had been since I felt nervous in a good way. Since I felt wanted. Caleb showed up that Sunday with 2 paper cups of coffee and a quiet smile. "Come with me," he said. "I want to show you something." I didn't ask where we were going. I just grabbed my cardigan and locked the front door behind me. We drove north past the edge of town through winding roads flanked by tall birch trees. The windows were down, the breeze cool and clean. Neither of us spoke much. We didn't need to. Eventually, he turned off onto a gravel road that led to a clearing by a small lake still quiet and cradled by trees that looked like they'd been standing for 100 years. "This is where I come when things get loud," he said. It wasn't loud when he said it, but I understood. Life doesn't always scream. Sometimes it hums at a pitch that slowly wears you down. We walked along the edge of the water shoes, crunching lightly over scattered pine needles. He told me this place belonged to his grandfather once, that he used to camp here as a boy. "No one comes here anymore," he said, "except me." "And now me," I added gently. He smiled. "I'm glad." We sat on a fallen log beneath a leaning maple. For a long moment, we said nothing. I watched the sunlight ripple across the lake. He watched me. "You don't look at me like I'm older than you," I said quietly, "because I don't feel it." "You should." "Why?" he asked. "Because it makes more sense to other people." I looked down at my hands. They were steady, capable, but not the hands of someone 30 years old. I had lived. I had loved. I had lost. "There are things I can't give you," I said. "Youth, time, the kind of beginning you deserve." He reached for my hand and held it gently between his. "I'm not looking for a beginning," he said. "I'm looking for something real, and real isn't always young." My throat tightened. "This isn't easy." "I'm not asking for easy," he said. "I'm asking for honest." For the first time, I didn't look away. I let him see everything, my fear, my hope, my disbelief that someone like him could see someone like me and stay. "I don't know where this goes," I said. "Neither do I," he replied. "But I'd like to find out. With you." There, in the stillness of the woods, something inside me softened. The part of me that always chose caution. The part that told me I didn't deserve another chance. It didn't disappear, but it loosened its grip. And for the first time, I leaned in. Not with words. Just a quiet moment, forehead against his shoulder, hands entwined like roots finally breaking through soil that had long gone dry. The following week, the whispers started. First, it was Marlene from the library asking how I knew that young man in the truck. Then it was my neighbor Dan who stopped by while I was watering the roses just to say, "You've had a lot of company lately, haven't you?" No one said anything cruel. No one had to. It was the tone. The way people tried to smile while their eyes asked questions they didn't have the courage to speak aloud. I had lived long enough to recognize judgment hiding behind politeness. One morning, I caught my own reflection in the hallway mirror, the same woman, same silver-streaked hair, same careful eyes, but something was different. I looked alive. And that scared me more than anything they could have said. Caleb kept showing up not just for the garden, but for dinners, for late afternoon walks, for quiet evenings where we barely spoke and still felt completely heard. He never pushed, never asked for more than I could give. But I knew what he deserved: honesty. One evening, as we sat on the back porch watching the sky fade from peach to blue, I finally spoke. "People are talking." He nodded. "I figured. They think it's inappropriate, that I should know better." He looked at me, unwavering. "Do you—" I let the question hang between us. And then slowly, I shook my head. "I don't think I care anymore," I said. "Not about what they think. Not if it costs me this." He reached for my hand, not possessive, not dramatic. Just steady. "I'm not here because I pity you," he said. "I'm not confused. I'm not chasing some fantasy. I'm here because when I'm with you, the world feels quiet and kind and real." I swallowed the lump in my throat. "And if it gets harder, then we do hard things," he said, "together." I thought of all the things I had done alone: grief bills, holidays, silence. I had survived it all. But this was something I didn't want to survive. I wanted to live it. So I stopped hiding. I brought him to the local art fair. We walked side by side down Main Street, our fingers laced. People stared, some smiled, some didn't, but I kept walking. I introduced him to Marlene. I let Dan see us holding hands. I didn't offer explanations. Love doesn't need permission slips. 1 month later, my garden was blooming in a way it hadn't in years. But it wasn't just the flowers. It was the music playing in the kitchen again. The books pulled from the shelves. The laughter echoing through the hallway after dinner. And it was Caleb barefoot in the grass planting lavender near the fence. "Why lavender?" I asked. He looked up at me with that soft smile. "Because it lingers." So I let him stay. And in doing so, I stayed too, no longer just in the house, in the habits, in the shadow of what had been, but in myself. If this story touched you, reminded you of something you'd forgotten or maybe never dared to believe, leave a comment and let me know. And if you'd like to hear more quiet stories with loud hearts, don't forget to subscribe. You never know what second chances are still waiting to bloom.